Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of our epic X-Men reread here on Crushing Comics. I'm joined by my friends and fellow X-fans from across the world from me, Tyler and Fariha, and we are here to read some classic Claremont X-Men. Today, we're going to be tackling Uncanny X-Men 116 and 117, as well as the modifications to those two issues and their backup stories in Classic X-Men number 22 and 23. Before we get started, this is quite a lengthy, geeky endeavor to shuffle all of the X-Men into the correct reading order. What other wonderful geek endeavors are the two of you up to right now? I don't know. What about you, Tyler?
You're gonna laugh at me. Because of you, I actually started trying to start a D&D campaign.
With strangers? Did you find other people you knew that already?
With people in the Omni group.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
I've always wanted to do one with like internet people, but it's it's a lot to organize just for friends. I don't know about being in two.
It is, and we are in like how many? 1, 2, 3, 4 different time zones.
Ooh.
Oh, so that's going to be
Yeah, that's going to be a while. And then in terms of collectibles, I got my first set of HeroClix, Hotspot HeroClix, and one of the chase that I really, really want is this.
Oh, is it Wolverine?
Old Man Logan Phoenix. And I'm so
just trying to upset me nice and early in the recording today, so I get riled up.
I know you didn't like the story, but I like this figure because I thought it's really cool.
It is a very cool figure. HeroClix like mystifies me. I remember being around for the beginning of HeroClix and but also playing Magic and things like that. And I just don't understand how all of the information is contained on their little dial. And this is not the time to explain it all to me, but it's mystifying to me.
I'm only collecting the figures. I'm not playing it. Yeah. So.
Oh, it's a game?
It is a game. It's a tabletop game.
Yeah, they each have powers and stuff, and
that's why you have all these like little clicks here.
Yo, guys, all this time I just thought they were just figures that you like Funko Pops, and I always saw those. I'm like, what are those for?
What are those?
Some of them are really cool though. Like the sculpts are really neat. They really push them super far.
Yeah.
Right.
What about you, Freya? What's nerd like life for you right now?
So I am obviously in this whole X-Men endeavor. And then I decided that I'm going to read so much X-Men that I'm going to become bitter and angrier. Like more bitter and more angrier. So I am just now following your guide on Crushing Crisis and Crushing Comics, and then going and then figuring out how to kind of save all of them in Marvel Unlimited in a way so that it makes sense. And with X-Men it has to be confusing, it has to be convoluted, or else it's not an X-Men, right? So I'm just trying to kind of follow through all of that, and then on the side I'm also trying to see I have a couple, I don't know if you can see it from here, but then these boxes of stuff comics that I kind of make using just a BCW comic folio. So I'm trying to see if I can get one for Wonder Woman, but I'm trying to see what era of comics will make sense and how expensive it can get. So I'm kind of also working on that on the side as well. Just something to keep me busy.
Yep. I'm very happy I kind of got all of my Wonder Woman before all the movie stuff. I remember the bulk of my floppies actually came from, I found somebody on Craigslist basically selling all of Wonder Woman, I guess that's volume 2, the 1987 one, for like $200, but it was every issue. They just wanted to get it like out of their house. And I was like, well, Craigslist sometimes pops up some interesting deals, especially less so for collected editions, but for floppies, because people just don't realize what the market is. They don't want to know. They don't want to eBay. They just want to get it out of their house.
That's the George Perez run?
Yeah, starts at George Perez, which in my mind are probably the best comic books of the 1980s. I hold them on a very, very high pedestal.
Yeah, so I was actually kind of thinking maybe that's the route I want to go, but I want to read them first a little bit before I can decide.
Well, my recent nerd stuff has not been comics. I am an obsessive collector, both of comics, well, not both of comics and many other things, but especially music. And I do this project where I try to basically put together a sequential listen to somebody, just like we do a sequential read for X-Men. And so every few months, I am reminded of some artist, and I'm like, oh, it would be cool to listen to all of them in sequence. And I forget what made me think of it, but this weekend I was thinking about the Go-Go's, like Our Lips Are Sealed and Vacation, and We Got the Beat. And I was like, I just have those 3 songs. And so then I went down this rabbit hole of like, well, what are all the Go-Go's albums? Do I want all their solo projects? Whatever. So I'm like starting to amass this is the only way I know how to live life. All of my projects are like complete sequential projects.
Yeah. Are you gonna make a go-go guide as well?
Well, I have done this now for 200 artists where I research every single recording they've ever done. It started when David Bowie passed away and I did it for him. And then I just kept going and going. So I just have folders upon folders of every recording. Like if they did backing vocals somewhere, if they produced somebody, like I have it all in order. And I've just never figured out how to do web content with it, but it's all there waiting to be published. So yes, the answer
I'm
is
pretty
yes.
sure there is a market in there somewhere. Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure once you do that and some like producer wants to create a encyclopedia or something, they'll find it really useful. And then you can charge them for it maybe.
Right. It's all about how does it get monetized.
Yeah.
Not really. No, we do these things.
It always
for fun.
starts with a hobby.
Right. It starts with a hobby, and then you figure out how to turn it into
and then
hustle.
if it becomes, if it makes money for you, great.
Today, we were digging into these X-Men stories. We're in a very particular time, right? So the X-Men had that big blowout with Magneto. Right now, they're stuck in the Savage Land. And it's kind of like, where in the world are the X-Men as they circumnavigate the globe to get back to the United States? Never once thinking they try to get in touch with Xavier and everybody, as we'll see in this run. So this is, it's a very specific run of X-Men. You get to see Claremont kind of playing with different locations and things for the team after establishing who they are. And where we pick up in Uncanny X-Men 116, they're in the middle of the Savage Land, and they tried to leave only to find it suddenly blizzarding at the end of the last issue, which is weird for the Savage Land. It's this warm dome of Antarctica. And so they come back and they realize that this God King villain, is basically creating ecological disaster with his major headquarters here. And then it puts the entire Savage Land at risk. So without too much debate or thought, the X-Men kind of just into the breach they go to defeat the God King. And that's where we are in this issue. Fariha, you are a brand new reader here, having not read these before. What did you think of 116?
Good filler, kind of it felt like more of the same fighting. And then, it's like, oh, X-Men gets into something, head first without necessarily thinking about it, and then they get captured, and then 3 of them is like, oh, we gotta go save the others, and then the end. But this one actually had a little bit of a really great moment with Storm, like something that she has gone through, and then I think Wolverine also was beginning to show the kind of Wolverine we know, not necessarily now. Like, we have some debate about now Wolverine, but you know what I mean, like the more like something that we have seen more recently. So I think there was like some good elements in it, but overall it just like something I'm not gonna remember compared to that Magneto issue that we talked about. That was amazing.
What about Banshee? Like, what do you think about Banshee here?
I don't know. He's just there. I try not to think about cave dwelling Banshee, like it's just there.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, he I think he got a scene here, like on the cover with his mouth basically gagged.
And so
that's it.
But the thing is, that's actually pretty. I was going to talk about it a little bit later because his mouth was gagged, and then Cyclops' eyes were gagged, or gagged. Like the Cyclops had something on their eyes, and I was actually noticing all of these things in the art because I'm like, Tyler and Peter are going to talk about art. I have to notice these things. But then I was actually kind of thinking, like, what kind of clothes or what kind of material is being used that works on Banshee and on Cyclops, and why do they have that in the Savage Land? I mean, it's one of those like overthinking questions, but
I know. but poor Banshee, no one seems to like him. He just get a little bit here, a little bit there. At least until now, that's all he has. Like, uh, a couple of panels here, a couple of panels there. Remember how he flew up and got caught by the dinosaur, and then and need some rescuing, that kind of thing. So
well, something I definitely feel happening, as we move forward in the run is that every character in a fiction, they need to have their place. If they're too similar, whether that's in powers or personality or whatever, it becomes hard to do things with them. I've been explaining this a lot to the kid lately because we've been watching X-Men, the animated series. And she's like, well, why does it have this character, not that character? Why does it have Rogue and not Colossus? I'm like, well, they already had somebody tough. And she's like, well, Rogue and Colossus are not the same. And I'm like, yeah, but for kids in a 20-minute cartoon, you don't need two big muscle tough people. And I do feel like that's kind of what's happening here is that Banshee was like the flying person, but Storm is this flying person. So Banshee's kind of a natural leader, but Cyclops is a natural leader. And so then they're also playing that like Banshee's old and experienced as opposed to all these kids. But now with Burns' arrival, Wolverine has kind of turned into the old and experienced one. So Banshee has just become the odd man out. And what I don't particularly love this part of the run, but every time I read this issue, my amnesia clears about halfway through. And I remember that this is the issue where it really starts to feel like Wolverine's history actually makes sense with him. Like he's talking to animals, he's like making strategic decisions, he's leading them into the cave. It's very quickly turning into the Wolverine who does connect with all of his older stories. And if you were doing like a sequential Wolverine read that then terminated in Giant Size X-Men and took you into X-Men, the first 15 issues of Wolverine, or I guess 20 now, in X-Men probably would not make a lot of sense. Like this is the point where he starts really feeling like the classic Wolverine. But also, I mean, I feel like Nightcrawler and Storm, and I think that this is a lot of Burns' contributions. You can tell who he likes spending time with. Claremont is like picking up on that, and the team is starting to change, even though it's the same characters doing the same thing. And my final comment in this diatribe is you can almost feel that shift in the issue because the beginning is this very pat, like, oh no, flying dinosaurs are taking our team away thing, which feels really similar to a lot of the ways the team has been picked off so far. But then their infiltration of this base and them sneaking in and breaking out of it ultimately feels very, very different than anything that we've had before. And so you can almost feel the two tones within the same issue. I don't know, Tyler, do you agree? You've also read this many times.
No, I do. I mean, I kind of enjoy this part before the pre-Dark Phoenix portion that Claremont and Byrne does. I think mainly because they are very what's the word? They developed the characters quite a bit. So you see very telltale characteristics of each character starts materializing and starts affecting the stories. So then, it feels like you get to know these characters more instead of, oh, the X-Men face this villain, let's all rush in, let's do this, and use this power one by one after another and defeat them. So it kind of, I mean, it's no longer that. There's a lot more subtle or not so subtle development along the way. I mean, like you mentioned, Wolverines is shown to be able to communicate with animals, and that has never been shown before. And so I think that's something which is kind of interesting here. And I think also in some ways, I think the art is plays a pretty huge part here. Is it's a little bit more dynamic. I mean, not to ding on Cockrum, but it really changes here. In my opinion, that that later on when Cockrum came back, he picked up on as well, and his work on the X-Men in the his second run on the X-Men is actually a lot more dynamic than before that. So I mean, I like this story, but this is the pre-Dark Phoenix story. This is not my favorite. So, but
and this is why we read X-Men together, because now that you pointed it all over, I'm like, oh, this issue is actually much better than I think it is.
Well, the thing I wanted to come back and ask you is, you know the modern versions of all these characters, and part of the kind of drag of this early run is it's like, when did they get to be them? Was there somebody who stuck out for you in this issue doing something? Because I definitely have one to talk about where you're like, oh, that's the them that I know and love.
Well, Wolverine would probably be my pick for that. And there was like a lot of different layers of him though, because at first when the Zabu, right? The Zabu is like, he's kind of confused because is that he or she? It's like he's confused because of like, the Ka-Zar was taken away, and then it kind of initially feel that Wolverine is going to attack Zabu, but then he was like, no, come here, kitty, like, you just go on to do your thing, so that was pretty cute. And then in the next page he actually straight up kills a person. And then Storm and Nightcrawler was like, oh no, what? That's not the X-Men we are. And so then that was also and then same time it was like at once he's like, yeah, good work, Ororo, and then the next page is like, hey babe, it's my size.
I know, right?
This is what it's like, I'm like, like it's like 1 step forward, 10 step back. And then we kind of ended up with 9 step back compared to 11 step before.
But this issue is also the first time that Wolverine was being self-deprecating. He said something like, at my size, that ain't hard. So, like referring to his shortness. And I thought that was something different because he has always, he wasn't that sensitive before that.
Yeah, there's a certain acerbic quality to him here that is definitely a Wolverine thing that is being developed at this point, for sure.
Right. Yeah, but I also didn't quite get the conversation. It's like, Wolverine, there is more to you than meets the eye. At my size, babe, that ain't hard. I don't know what that means.
Well, because not much of him is meeting the eye, Fariha.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. Like, and then there's actually more of this kind of comes through in like issue, so this is 116, 18. I think 118 has some of this like same type of conversation of like more of Wolverine that we suddenly know. So I think, we are getting there, and it's kind of good to know that, like you guys pointed out, that it was John Byrne's influence that starting to show.
So Peter, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Like, I'm always not very I wouldn't say aware, but I'm not very sure what the role of a letterer is in the comics in the past. Besides of course filling in word balloons and stuff like that. Like, do they design the word balloon as well as fill in the words handwritten at that time? Because these issues actually welcome one of Claremont's most the person that he collaborated most in comics.
That's right.
That is letterer Tom Oxyczowski. So I mean, he's not a regular letterer yet, which will come in I think a couple of issues later. But can you talk a little bit about like how a letterer can influence a comics, how a good one can influence a comics and a bad one can actually brings it down?
I can rant about a bad one. Peter knows about it. But Peter, you go ahead.
Well, at the time it was hand lettering, and not only hand lettering, but the bubbles had to be put on the page. And if you find classic art that you want to purchase, you'd be lucky enough to own a classic X-Men page by John Byrne, you will see the letters as actual paste ups on the page. But part of that is there needing to be room in the panel. And so that's kind of like the collaboration between the writer and the artist and the letterer, especially in some of these small panels. I mean, we get into 9-panel grid at one point here, and there's only so much stuff that you can fit in 9-panel grid and still show action. And especially if you look at the page where they're being attacked by the pterosaurs, in that first panel, there's nowhere to put a word balloon. Cyclops is blasting into the sky. The rider is approaching him from behind, which becomes a plot point in a moment. And there was nowhere in that panel to put a balloon. I'm not good at saying his name. Tom, our letterer Tom.
Yeah.
He very wisely uses the gutter space to let the lettering straddle both panels. Now, first of all, that is unusual even today for lettering to be in the gutter space. Like he was really up against a wall there, literally in the art. But also, it's clever because it shows that the thing that he's saying has to do with the motion between the two panels too. And it's those kinds of choices. Like some other letterer might have just chosen to put that lettering squeezed into the bottom of under Cyclops' fist or over his optic eye beam. But like that's a choice, and a choice a lot of letterers would make. So it's those choices about placement, especially in a tight page like this, and when you have Claremont especially, who is writing the maximum amount of stuff that you can put into a page, that really comes through. And also the choices of like what to do with the word balloons and how to put the text in the word balloons. You'll notice that the modern convention is that letters and word balloons are often centered, which I find kind of hard to read. Centered text doesn't give you a solid margin on one side to kind of let your eye rest upon. But here you'll find that a lot of the balloons actually have all of their words aligned to one side. And a lot of times the balloons will actually hug one side of a panel to set that up. So there's like a lot of little things. And even, how to show the whispering, right? The X-Men are whispering to each other. And there's a Marvel convention at that point that the bubbles would be a little bit dashed, but just like how to execute that. So it's all of those choices are being done by hand. And I always marvel with Tom's letters that like the utter consistency of his lettering. Like if you zoom in and look at two A's close to each other, they're noticeably a little bit different, but they are pretty darn similar. And this is just through a whole issue. It just blows my mind. And he is by far one of my favorite letterers. And it really actually stuck out to me because later in my read, I came to an issue that was not by him. And I was like, oh, what's going on? Like, do I need to wipe my glasses? No, it's because it's not his letters.
Yeah.
But the thing I wanted to come back to for a second, we've already talked about Wolverine a lot here, but Wolverine's not the only character going through a transformation here. And I'm not just talking about Colossus being bright pink because they lit him on fire, although I do love that. We get this really interesting contrast of Storm and Cyclops at the end. Cyclops, at this point, I would say he's been a leader in name only. Like he mostly is there to admonish the team. It doesn't feel like he's done a lot of things where he's taken initiative to be a leader. He basically is just like, you should have done that better, right? But here it's Cyclops who on his own winds up kind of chasing down our villain at the end here. All the rest of the team is heavens knows where. And he gets into this optic blast battle with him at the end, to the point that Cyclops really thinks that he's going to be done for, but it's like his responsibility to throw himself into the breach. And immediately we see that contrasted with Storm, right? Because, there's this big explosion. Both Cyclops and the villain are falling into the pit. Banshee easily plucks Cyclops out of the air, but Storm is determined that we have to save the villain too. And even though she's not really in a leadership capacity here, we're really starting to see her values come through. She even, had that moment earlier in the issue with Wolverine killing the person and her aghastness at that. But this, where she's really almost risking herself to save this person, and you get the feeling that if that overwhelming terror hadn't hit her when she linked minds with him that caused her claustrophobia to kick in, she would have saved this person who was about to kill them all. It's very Storm, And so I just feel like, especially because Wolverine, Cyclops, and Storm long-term are really the trinity of X-Men leadership, like it or not, it's really interesting to see that the beginnings of the developments of all three of those here all in one issue.
And to her saving, to the point where she's saving the guy.
What is his name? Garrok? I always forget his name.
Garrok.
Yeah, Garrok.
So do you think, to me, it felt like it more kicked in because she saw the other killing before? Do you feel that way, that it was just a response to what she had seen before, and she was like, that's not who we are, or that's not who I want to be, and so she decided to kind of jump in on that? Because
I do.
I was, I wasn't quite I didn't quite have the reference on where she was before. How is she okay with killing hench people, but not okay with where is she in this?
I mean, for me, I think things were kind of mixed as to when these characteristics of her came in, because she has always, well, at least especially in Claremont's run up to a certain point, she has always been like, no, all lives are sacred. I will not kill. So I don't know if this is the first time we have ever seen it, or so my memory of it is kind of mixed up or mashed up together. So I can't really speak of this. What about Peter?
It's developing again, and I think that we've maybe seen a little bit of preciousness from her before here, but this is Claremont trying to push them all apart a little bit. So before here, we've seen many different ones being like, oh, we don't want to kill them or whatever, but now it's like specifically a Storm thing. I think that's the difference, that maybe we've seen some of these characters express these traits, but it's been much more across the team, that they all kind of can do things interchangeably. And now we're starting to see them separate a little bit. And he's still kind of deciding what that's going to look like for Nightcrawler, which we'll start to get in the next few issues, and what that's going to look like for Colossus.
So regarding this scene, right, I actually have not noticed this before until this reread. And it is this: the art in this scene and Claremont's caption does not quite line up. So the art clearly shows Storm getting hit by falling rocks instead of being petrified. And yet Claremont wrote that it is her petrification that made her missed saving Garrok. And
I feel like the caption is, images collide in her mind, Garrok's eyes mirroring the ancient terror within her. Without meaning to, she hesitates. Not only do you just don't get a visual sense of that at all. And I always am confused and I get stuck on that panel. It makes me wonder, is Claremont trying to set up the Shadow King stuff that's going to happen in the next issue with him? It really always feels discontinuity to me.
So this is kind of in line with what Byrne said about why he eventually left the title. I remember reading one of the interview where he said that, they were doing these mostly in the Marvel way. So both Byrne and Claremont will come together, agree on the plot, and then Byrne will go back and do the art himself, and Claremont will later come in to fill in the details, the dialogue, and the captions. So in one instance, not this instance, he gave an instance for an issue later on that is like, actually two different instances, that he wrote that they agree on something and he drew something, and then Claremont came back and rewrite the scene to suit, whatever he felt,
whatever he came up with in the interim.
And then Byrne felt like he was being disrespected, I think, in some ways. So I think this might be one of those cases where, the beginning of some of these cases where they agree on certain things, Byrne drew it certain ways, and then Claremont came in and either add another layer or try to turn the situation around with his captions and his words. So
now I'm gonna look in for these things as well. It's like, are they in agreement? What's going on, guys? I'm gonna get a magnifying glasses and then go into. But to be honest, I had to read this page twice.
Yeah, it really doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I was also confused. I'm like, wait, what? What happened? Oh, okay. Sure.
Well, and in terms of Claremont's urge to revise, now of course we have Classic X-Men on top of this, and you'd think that they would go back and do some reworking on that page, since that's the one that really doesn't make a lot of sense. But mostly the thing that happens in the Classic X-Men is the more detail on the scene where Wolverine kills the guard, just to make it seem a little bit less abrupt and like a little bit less casual, and to build in more of that objection from Storm and Nightcrawler. So that's really the only major change. There's a lot of small relettering changes in the issue, but none of them really amount to anything. It's mostly an extra page to give some more definition to the murder of the guard.
I actually kind of like the abruptness of it all. So I'm like, that's not canon.
Yeah. I thought it was really funny how Storm basically fling Nightcrawler away in the edition, because she suddenly just caught hold of Kurt and then throw him into the shadows and then fly over Wolverine after tackling him onto the ground. I thought that was really funny. But yeah, I agree. It really doesn't add much to that scene.
But do we want to talk about the Colossus turning pink? Because that's a very scientific thing. I was like, whoa, he actually operates like a actual steel.
Right, because he's getting warmer, and so why does steel glow? You're our engineer. Why does steel turn colors as it gets warmer?
It's like vibration.
Really?
Yeah, I think I'll have to come back to actual reasons. I don't want to give fake news, but the thing is, I think it's more to do with vibration.
So the faster they vibrate, the shorter wavelength gets reflected, which is why it appears more red, because
guys, don't let's not become like a fake science.
I'm not.
I'll research this and report back for a future episode, guys.
Yeah, physics is my worst thing. So
so it's mine. But
wait, you're an engineer.
I know. I can't say those things. So I'm more into like the like a flow of stuff going from point A to point B.
What's always funny to me is, the pink is so striking on the page, especially because on newsprint paper at that time, pink was a color that really popped. And you just know if there was a modern recoloring of this, it would be this like total BS orange, kind of like orangey red, because God help us that something should be pink. Like, is pink a color Steele really, really changes? Like, no, it's more of like an orangey red, but it's just so much more memorable that he's pink. It just like, I always remember, it's time for Pink Colossus. And of course, that would be the kind of thing that would get changed if they were to modernize the coloring here. So this issue ends with, like all done in the Savage Land, the X-Men finally can get on a boat because this little wooden craft is going to help them cross the entire ocean to get back to somewhere. And immediately they hit a storm at sea. And I think it's just funny because it kind of shows you how young these characters are. The Storm's like, it's a typhoon. I can't do anything about that. Like modern Storm would, make cyclones that let her teleport around the globe. It's just really interesting, the power creep. And it teases this next issue, Psy-War, which we're going to jump right into. So we have Uncanny X-Men issue 117, and this is Psy-War. It's an incredibly, incredibly significant issue. I would say one of the few that you must read in this run if you're just kind of picking and choosing. Because even though the X-Men are lost at sea, most of this is about Xavier and him recollecting his post-war life, including his first encounters with Storm, as it happens, as well as with Amahl Farouk, the Shadow King, which is super significant, although it won't really come back for a long, long, long time in Claremont's run. Yeah. Fariha, what did you, and I should say here, we didn't give the standard disclaimer at the beginning, but we do spoilers in this podcast and for modern books. And because of some of the natures of Professor X's journey here, we're going to talk about Jonathan Hickman's House of X and Powers of X, because it completely alters the way that we'd be looking at this, but we're going to try not to spoil anything past House of X and Powers of X, since that's about a year and a half old. You've had some time to get on board. So Fariha, what did you think of this one-off issue of Professor X's history and his first meeting with the Shadow King?
So like the Magneto issue 112 or 113, this is one of my one of my most favorite issue that I have read in this, like, so far. There was it was something, I really like that whole idea of like the mental fighting, even though it must look really dumb outside.
Yeah, because it's because visually they are like just two people sitting there and
staring at each other. But then in the mind, there's like a lot of fighting going on. There's their knight armor and all of that was happening. At one point, he kind of looks like Silver Surfer, which is weird. But yeah, so there's like a lot of that going on. And also we kind of get to see hear a lot the Jean is like, I can't be here anymore. There's too much memories. And then there's all this and then also Lilandra is having all this discussion. And then I'm like, well, aren't you guys soulmates? Why are you asking these questions now? These are the first questions you ask someone when you're, meeting them. Well, haha, jokes. But yeah, so I think overall, I really enjoyed this issue. But then it also kind of, so is Professor X not English in X-Men?
No.
Because he's not. Okay.
No.
Okay, so that's my movie dumb moment. Okay, so he's not. He's never been English.
But he spent a long time in England, so maybe like Madonna, he has just picked up the accent over time.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Because, he was like, oh yeah, I was drafted into war. I'm like, which war? And I'm like, how old is it? And that's also I was kind of mostly stuck with that. But the thing is, it's Vietnam War that he was.
I believe it is the Korean War.
Korean War.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, it doesn't make him all that old. I mean, this was in 1978. If he was drafted into Korea, at the age, we're at the point that it interrupted his studies, and now he's 23 years older. He's not that old. He's not elderly.
He's not.
But I do want to do.
Very elderly.
He does, and he has those crazy
that's
eyebrows. In that one page of Burn, his eyebrows are they stand up off of his face. Like you can see daylight between his forehead and his eyebrows. They're so wild and huge. Well, let's get into that Mora stuff for a second, because Professor Xavier, at the time, you're just like, oh, here's the background of why he's so friendly with Mora. They're sometimes housekeeper, sometimes terrorist security guard with their machine gun. But now we have to really look at it with a totally new set of eyes. He says, I was working toward my doctorate when I met Mora McTaggart, and it was love at first sight for both of us. Well, that's not quite true anymore. It was more like love at first mind meld to show him that there were 9 lives of defeat previously, and they had to collaborate with each other. And it's really interesting that like he's even locked that away from Lilandra. Like he obviously can't reveal that to Lilandra. And so he has this like psychic cover story for that even his soulmate, if we're looking at it from the House of X, Powers of X perspective, cannot access. And to her, it's like, oh, he just fell in love with this Mora McTaggart. But to him, he's like, here's where I learned the potential fate of the mutant race and that it was up to me to prevent it.
So with that in mind, I have 2 questions. Do you think he's in Cairo to look for Apocalypse? And then the second question is there a reason why he wanted to go to space at this time?
Probably. Now, if you think about it, like probably. But at that time, obviously, that's not the reason.
Yeah, at that time, it's not.
Like, why are you in Egypt?
Why are you in Cairo?
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, like, this is the first appearance of Amahl Farouk.
It is.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but it was actually very telling. Like he was talking about, he also learned this is for the first time how mutant power can be dangerous in different people, and I think that's actually also telling because we have seen that happen again and again. It's like really depends on what you do with the power. But he also is not very good because he's just like randomly attacking children. And
well, she picked his pocket. Oh,
yeah, come on. Don't mess up some random child. It's like I'm just like, hey child, where have you been? I'm like, ew. And in the alleyway, I'm like, the whole idea is like gross.
Well, then he like nail it. He's like, I hit her with like a gentle side bolt. Like, and she's gonna like cluck like a chicken every time she passes an alleyway for the rest of her life. Do you think these things through, Professor Xavier? So I find this 1-page montage of his history so fascinating because even at the time, there's this mystery element to it where Mora's like she's breaking her engagement, returning to Scotland. She wouldn't say why. But if you read this with this modern view, having read House of X #2, I really feel it's like maybe Xavier's not moving fast enough for her, right? Like he's kind of ambling along. There's no X-Men yet. He hasn't put a team together. And Mora is like, the clock is ticking. And so she says, maybe I'm going to go do something else. And he is cursed with his knowledge, right? From Mora, if we're playing by the House of X rules. And so he kind of just goes on a walkabout and it's him meeting this evil mutant, which according to him here, if we trust him, he's never really done before, that makes him really realize how serious Mora's information from her past lives is. He's like, oh my gosh, like this is one of these people that she's probably encountered and has told him about. And maybe he was even hoping to bump into, not really fully believing her about the seriousness of the situation, only to discover, oh my word, it's actually really quite serious. And mutants that are this evil cause a potential harm to all of humanity as well as all of mutantdom.
Well, Moira also wondered like how much Xavier and Magneto actually remembered what she shared with them, right? So I think in one of her diary entries, she said that they probably don't remember some of the final details, and I'm not going to let them read my mind again,
right?
Because I remember something like that. So it could be because of that as well, that Xavier knew the general idea of like what needs to be done, but he doesn't know certain things, and that could be the reason why. I mean, there's another reason I think why Moira broke the engagement, and but that will come into play, I think, maybe sometime later.
Yeah, and a few issues. Fariha, what did you think of all of this in terms of our modern knowledge?
Right. No, I was just going to say that Moira should have picked two of you because you guys are so detail oriented and you remember everything. So that would have been something rather than like, these people were like, oh yeah, time. No, I was actually kind of thinking about it because I went back to reread some of the Moira Life things because I was kind of forgetting. And then anyway, but I think one of the things that it says in the Life 6 that she realizes that one of the things that's problem for mutants is time. Like time is the biggest enemy of mutants, and I think that kind of tracks with what you're saying, that Xavier was not moving fast enough, so for her to be like, okay, this is not working out and stuff like that. But at the same time, I mean, obviously, because we're trying to retcon something and trying to put the story in there, it's like, why not light the fire? Like, why just wait for Xavier to do something? Why not, why not just push faster? I don't know. I mean, obviously it doesn't make, when you try to look at it from that point of view, it's like, oh, you have to rewrite everything. Maybe in the next life we will.
And what did you think about this idea? And I don't know if you knew about it before, that Xavier had met Storm before. Aside from him cornering her in an alleyway, what did you just think about this idea that this young Storm slipped through his fingers before he even had his original 5 X-Men?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's also something goes back to him not taking the initiative, because if he kind of knows these young mutants are out there, he I don't know, kidnap Storm from the street and bring her over. So I think this move falls more in line with oh yeah, the characters met each other before. I didn't quite necessarily think of it anything more than that, but I wasn't also quite sure that he realized that she is a mutant.
Yes, it is.
He did.
It's in the caption itself. So
Oh,
if you go to that page where he froze her, in the middle, right in the middle.
Oh, okay.
I recognize her latent.
Oh, latent mutant. So maybe he was waiting for the mutant thing to, and maybe that's how he knew to go and find her there, So maybe just kept keeping track, and maybe this is when he first realized that, oh, I need to create Cerebro or whatever way to find more mutant. So I think it's more of a chance encounter that may have given him a lot of ideas for later on.
And it's, I guess the reason this just fascinates me is not only because it was a really significant flashback at the time, not only because of the House of X #2 stuff, but here's Claremont really altering the history of the X-Men with intent, right? He puts a huge story in there for X-Men, for Xavier. He basically has this as Xavier's discovery of the astral plane, and potentially one of the first reasons he realizes he has to be a force for good. He introduced the idea that he's met Storm before all the other original 5. This is pretty bold stuff for Claremont to just be throwing out on an issue. And even before we look at future retcons to this, it absolutely changes your read. We could go back and reread now classic X-Men in the way that somebody who somehow had access to those issues in the late 1970s could have, and said wow, all this reads differently now that I know that Professor Xavier met the Shadow King and all this stuff. But then also Shadow King does not really come back in other than in a retcon capacity in inserted stories like classic X-Men for 130 issue, a really long time, Tyler.
A long time. It just appears to be a throwaway thing,
right? That you would never think of again.
Yeah, you don't think of it again. But that's the thing with Claremont. he will be oh, I ran out of ideas, and then somehow someone will remind him of what about this character that you introduced how many years ago, almost 10 years ago, and he'll be oh yeah, I can work with that. So I thought that was really interesting.
No, and if you look at the fact that before when a character actually died, right? Yeah. So the thing is as far as the readers were concerned, that Amahl Farouk is dead. He's not coming back. So I think from that point of view, it must have been a shock, and a good one probably, to see that him coming back. I mean, now we know that he's around.
Yeah.
And I slightly misspoke the number of issues because I was just thinking of Uncanny X-Men, but Claremont first brings Shadow King back as a plot point in the early 30s of New Mutants, which is just before Secret Wars 2, so somewhere right around the 190s and 200 of Uncanny X-Men. And then he disappears again, only to be, a plot point starting in the Uncanny X-Men 250s and culminating, of course, in the Muir Island saga at the end of Claremont's run of Uncanny X-Men. But again, still, this was a character that got put to bed for 70 issues. And that in Claremont's mind, because we know how he works from reading this, it's not like he just remembered him later. In his mind, he was like, oh, now I have this unexploded grenade of this psychic mutant that I can bring back and use at some point when I really can twist the knife with it.
So here's a little bit of a criticism, right? What do you think of Amahl Farouk's skin color here?
Fariha?
Not good. No, I mean, knowing his origin, it's like, but then again, Egyptian people can be very white passing. So, so that's...
So maybe not.
Yeah, so from that point of view, it's like, but the thing is, like, if you're trying, I think it's actually for the better, because you don't want to introduce a dark-skinned character as bad person, like, it kind of falls into that that stereotype as well. So from that point of view, it's actually better. But I know for certain that Egyptian people can be white passing too. So I mean, although like the features of him is very Egyptian, but the skin tone can be. But to that point, and this, I'm gonna try my best not to be spoilery. But the thing is, the Shadow King's past that we now know, that is a new information, or that was like an old information that was recycled?
That's a new information.
Recent.
That's why I have been talking about the rehabilitation of Shadow King, or of Amahl Farouk. So in that sense, that's where I'm coming from.
Well, even in Claremont's various revisitations of the character, we do get the idea that the Shadow King mental energy leaps around from character to character and can be disembodied. But there's still, I think, and that's why we're rereading, the implication that it originated with Farouk in Claremont, even though it's jumping around after his potentially original body here is, deceased, if in fact that really happens. But I do want to go back to Fariha's point that his features are drawn as, non-white features, especially when Byrne goes into a tight close-up in a way that's actually a caricature, I think, almost taken a little bit too far. And I agree that if that was combined with a different colored skin tone at the time, it really would have gone all the way to like racist caricature. So I think the medium for 1978 was draw him with recognizably kind of like non-Caucasian features, but color him identically to Xavier. And, that's what we got.
So, no, I mean, so going back to his power level then, so Shadow King gives him power, or Amahl Farouk is the mutant?
At this time.
Who is a mutant?
And through the course of Claremont, the understanding I believe that we're supposed to have is that the Shadow King is such a powerful force on the astral plane that even after the supposed death of his original body, he continues on as mental energy and a mutant purely in the mindscape of the astral plane.
Correct. Shadow King and Amahl Farouk is one person. It's one thing.
Right.
So what Peter is alluding to is that when Amahl Farouk, the person, dies, Amahl Farouk psychic is so powerful that it continues to live on to survive on the psychic plane.
And then it finds another medium.
Yeah, and then he takes over someone else.
Okay. Gotcha.
Well, and there aren't a ton of revisions in the classic X-Men for this issue. Yeah. It inserts a second epilogue of the X-Men on the boat. So what's been happening to frame all this is like the X-Men are discovered at sea by this Japanese freighter that's on a mission, but they're like, we can't make any contact or divert our mission, even though you're at the tip of South America right now. We're going back to Japan, so just shut up and you're along for the ride. And the classic X-Men issue basically just adds an epilogue to show that they're still on the boat, because at the beginning of the next issue, it actually feels kind of abrupt without this, but it also shows Wolverine like pining for poor dead Jean and him being like, that Scott doesn't even care, which we all know the feelings about on this podcast. It also does a lot of slight grammar grammar fixes, and it kind of like softens a lot of the absolutism in Xavier's recollections. If he's like, this happened like this, or then I immediately went to here, Claremont kind of softens that a little bit, because even between when this was published and when Classic X-Men was published, he had inserted a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
But then there are also two backup stories in Classic X-Men number 22 and 23. 22 fits right at the end of 116 and before the X-Men depart the Savage Land, and 23 happens at some unidentified point in the midst of 117 or between 117 and 118. So let's talk about Classic X-Men number 22 first. Storm falls through a lake in the Savage Land to another dimension where she becomes a sky pirate. Discuss.
Sure. Honestly, I was like, is this when she learned to become a pirate? And now we have her. This is the origin of Pirate Storm. I don't know. I didn't quite know what was going on. I didn't quite, because it seems like, because it was actually very good that we ended 116 with Wolverine saying that, no, she has to go figure it out herself.
Yeah.
So I thought that this would be more about that figuring out that she couldn't save someone and how it kind of fits into her thing. But it was kind of went into a different direction. And I'm like,
it is. I mean, I agree, because I don't really remember this story until I reread again. I was like, oh, okay, so this is what happened. And I mean, I feel like a couple of things that might be me reading too much into it. There is this particular dream sequence of Storm, and I think the way the caption is saying is that she is finally being saved by something, and that panel sort of panel that says that she's saved shows her in the X-Men costume. So I was just wondering if that subconsciously she's saying that being an X-Men saved her in a way.
I think that's my read. Yeah.
Okay.
That she's just out on the plains pretending to be a goddess without any real focus in life. And like X-Men gave her a different and more direct purpose.
Mm-hmm. So was it all in a dream? Or this really happened? Or this is like an oxygen deprived situation because she fell into the water? I mean, okay.
Isn't this kind of like the question mark, because it's very never-ending story, right?
It is. They ride around on like a giant Falcor with this pirate ship on its back.
Okay.
Claremont loves these like pocket reality stories. It's what he does in a lot of the annuals once we start getting to the annuals. Part of it because it like doesn't really interrupt the flow of the story, and he can go tell this huge adventure with no need to consider continuity in the slightest, but also because he likes putting all these little unexploded bombs, and he very frequently will go back and like reference one element of the alternate reality or dimension or whatever story in the future, which is where I think Marvel gets a lot of its conception of like when they ran Secret Wars in 2015, saying all of these Battle World stories will have one element that a future story will refer to. That's very, very Claremontian, he sends them to Asgard, or he sends them to Akron's realm, or he sends them to Limbo or whatever, and they come back with this one piece of information that becomes useful later. And I just think this one, unless there's something about it that I'm totally forgetting, I don't think any of it ever becomes useful later.
I did not. I mean, I don't remember for example, I don't remember the cameo crystal ever coming into play again, which was something that like Mirren gave Storm. And initially I thought there was some subtext between Mirren and Storm until the end it became a daughter-mother
it seemed like that one time skip was like them having romance sexy times.
Yeah.
And then it was like, they're like a mother and a daughter. I'm like, I read that totally wrong.
Yeah.
But to be honest though, I don't know whether that was added because of that there was like it was an editorial mandate to add that given that time, because I also thought the same thing, and I'm like, oh, mother-daughter. I'm like, please, that sounds like back in the day when people used to adopt each other because that's the way to pass on the pass on the hair and air on state and everything. So that's one of the reasons I feel like that was kind of mandated. But yeah, I was mostly thinking that maybe this will come into play later, but listening to you guys doesn't sound like it ever does.
Well, it turns out it does. This character comes back one time in X-Men Annual 12, which is a Claremont annual. It's part of the Evolutionary War crossover, and the X-Men go back to the Savage Land, and I guess Storm must make use of that amulet. So one day, when we get up to 1988 in our reread, we will get to understand why Claremont felt the need to invent this past for good old Marin. Her only other appearance.
And maybe she will be appearing in one of the issues we're going to be reading in This Week in X, and we'll be like, oh, remember?
And I'm sure it will be Al Ewing who brings her back. Okay, so now to move on to Classic X-Men number 23. I can't decide how I feel about this one. So in the middle of their travels on the Japanese freighter, one of the women on board goes overboard. Nightcrawler tries to teleport out and catch her, but she's in the middle of the freaking ocean. So he can't get back onto the ship, but both of them wash up separately on an island where there's evil beast people, and Nightcrawler needs to go on a swashbuckling adventure to save this young woman from being sacrificed to the gods of the beast people before they get picked back up by their ship. And again, because there's a bottle episode and it has to just fit, continue on their way to Japan. What did we think about this one?
So this was like Nightcrawler as Indiana Jones.
Yes.
Like, this was it's so Nightcrawler. And then the thing is, I thought that it was mostly like, it was nice because how he wants to be a movie star, so from that point of view, it kind of matches with that. Like it's theater, it's movie, it's like an adventure. And I really like the fact that the girl at the end is like, oh, how can I ever repay you? And he's like, we'll think of something. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of nice, because he's very self-conscious about ladies not liking him because how he looks and everything. So the fact that he got that, I thought that was pretty nice. And even though it's one of those like, oh yeah, the guy saved the girl, but for him, I'll let him have it. It's nice. I thought it was nice, even though it's weird, but okay.
Yeah. What about the makeshift hat that he wore with the leaves?
That made me laugh. Like even Nightcrawler cares about sun protection and his skin. Everybody wear a hat. It's like here, the sun is so strong at this part of the southern hemisphere that even when it's a cool day out, like today, there'll be a note like, make sure your kids are in, sun hats and sunblock and everything before you send them to school. Which to people who are from the US, like, you're like, really? It's not like it's like summer hot right now, but the sun is strong. So I felt like good job for Nightcrawler, who's probably in the southern hemisphere at this point, caring about sun protection.
Exactly. I mean, it is really, really strong sun in New Zealand. I mean, I didn't know that because I'm from Singapore. I'm like sunshine all around, and I typically don't wear sunscreen. So when I was in New Zealand, like many years ago, I was like, I don't have the habit of wearing sunscreen. And when I came home, my mom is like, why are you so dark? I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, just look at you. You're like 10. And I was like, really? I was like, oh, it must be the sun in New Zealand.
And but going back to the hat and I also really liked the way he kind of solved the problem, because he was like, kind of pretended to be faint, and then at the last moment bamfed out of there. By the way, being bamfed, like bamfing somewhere, should be a verb we should be using all the time. Because Wolverine coined it, and I think we should be using it. Just bamf out of here.
Well, they do. I feel like they do in the comic use it as a verb.
Yeah. Sometimes
but in real life.
Oh, in real life. Let's bamf the heck out of here.
Yeah, let's bamf the heck out of here. So,
but the other thing I also liked about this issue is the sound effects that they put in. Like when Nightcrawler kicked the beast, there's the boot. And then when he punched the priest, there's like pow. So I mean, I don't see that very often nowadays, but I thought it was really funny.
Right.
I guess
So,
my thing on this issue is like it just tries to do a little too much in a backup issue amount of time. Like, did they have to be beast people and did they have to have a high priest? I guess it's kind of like better than just saying that they're local savages or whatever, which is like so much worse. But it just felt like there were so many plot layers. Like there's a plane and there's beast people and they're sacrificing somebody to a volcano. Like it just felt like we could maybe remove one of those layers and it would give a little bit more room for it to be like a really memorable Nightcrawler story. But with that many layers, it's a little eye rolly. Like, okay, Claremont. But maybe that's just me. Like, I just get a little eye rolly when there's so many layers stacked on top of each other in a story. But it's cute. It's a very cute Nightcrawler story.
Yeah.
And then now we have like, both Colossus and Nightcrawler got some action during their adventure in Savage Land.
And Storm almost did until editorial said that Moraine had to be her mother.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the other question I have in this backup story, like, I mean, it is really nothing question, but it's like, well, how does Storm knows that the flare is from Nightcrawler?
Right? Because it's not like he went overboard with the flare. But I guess she just was on the lookout for anything flying around.
Yeah, but then it also reminded me of like mutant technology discussion that we had. Like, it's like, it is kind of like, it's like, yeah, she's just like used her, like, it's a clear day and she used her lightning to say that if it is, then he will know. Oh, that was
well, why couldn't she have done some skywriting? Couldn't she have sent him a message in the clouds? We're on our way, why?
She was thinking about Moraine, okay? That's why. See? It all connects. It all connects.
Well, now that we've connected the themes of all these issues for you, that's it for our discussion of Uncanny X-Men 116 and 117 and their corresponding Classic X-Men backups. If you want to keep up with our read, next issue will be Uncanny X-Men 118 and 119. You could place Classic X-Men 24 in that time period as well, but it has a very specific kind of, I won't say spoiler, but we'll say plot advancement that makes Tyler and I want to read it later. So we'll talk a little bit why next issue, but we're not actually going to read Classic X-Men 24's backup story yet. We're only going to refer to it. So really easy reading assignment for next time, 118 and 119. And until then, as Fariha mentioned earlier in the episode, I don't super love this X-Men Go Around the World arc, but it's really great to have people to talk to about it because why, Fariha?
X-Men is better when it's read together.
That's right. And it's so much fun reading it with Tyler and Fariha because they give me totally new perspectives on this material. And hopefully we have brought you some new perspectives as well. So on the behalf of all three of us, until we get to speak to you again, please be well.
Bye.